At the heart of every movie made are the screenwriters, the director, and what is shot and seen on the screen, which is the work of the director of photography. Today, we have with us the director of photography for Quantum of Solace, Roberto Schaefer.
Hi, this is Tom Pizzato.
And Dan Silvestri.
From SpyMovieNavigator.com. And today on our Cracking the Code of Spy Movie show, we're going to chat with Roberto Schaefer. Roberto's been the director of photography in many great films, including Finding Neverland, Monsters Ball, Stay, as well as 3 of Christopher Guest's great comedies. In this podcast, we're going to focus a lot on Quantum of Solace, but we'll also discuss Roberto's body of work and how that may have impacted Quantum. We have so much to talk about. This will be a 2-part podcast with Roberto. So let's get on with part 1.
Let's go. We are so excited and honored to have with us today a very special guest, the Quantum of Solace director of photography, Roberto Schaefer. Welcome, Roberto.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Roberto.
It's great to have you here, and we must say we've been very impressed with your body of work, not just Quantum. I mean, just fantastic stuff. And we're going to mention a few of these movies and films as we go along through our questions here. But we just wanted to bring that up front, that your body of work is great.
And it's really diverse, too, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what helps keep us going.
Yeah.
If you did the same thing over and over and over again, I think I would just fall asleep.
Yeah. It's really great stuff. So we're big Bond fans and spy movie fans, and that's why Tom and I are doing what we're doing. And the Bond franchise has been a juggernaut for decades now. So for Quantum, who first approached you about doing the film, and what was your reaction?
I got a phone call from Mark Forster, who, the director that I'd already done, 7 films with at that time, I think. He called me one day. I was sitting here. He called me. He was in New York. He says, I'm in New York, and I just had a meeting with Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson about directing the new Bond film. What do you think about that? And I said, really? I said, oh my God, yeah, let's do it. And he said, yeah, but the problem is, there's no real script. It's not finished. It's not really good. I'm a little worried about, getting in on something and there's a writer's strike, and I don't know what's going to happen. He says, I haven't seen a good script yet. And I said, Mark, it's a Bond film. Does it really matter? And he says, yeah, well, let me think about it. Let me see. And so then I called Matt Chessay, who's been the editor since Monsters Ball. I said, Matt, did you talk to Mark about this, doing a Bond film? He goes, yeah. He says, oh God, we've got to do this Bond film. Are you kidding? I said, yeah, it's been since childhood. It's history. It's a dream. They said, we've got to convince him. So then Mark had another meeting with them and called back again and said, so I'm thinking about doing it. Yeah, I had another meeting. I'm thinking about doing it. You guys think? And I said, yes, do it. Let's do it. Whatever. Come on. We'll make it work. We'll make it work. It's Bond. They've got money. We can make a great film no matter what. Let's just do it. I think we'll all be the saddest people on earth if we turn down an opportunity to do a Bond film.
Oh, exciting.
It was. And then when we finished it, before it got released and everything, he said to me in confidence, he says, they've offered me to do the next one too, but I don't think I'm going to take it because of the way this one went with the script and everything else and all that. And I said, I don't know. Think about it. I would love to do another one, but he passed.
Okay.
Because he wanted to get involved next with something where he could be a producer on.
Okay.
And be part of a franchise, which, the Bond films, you're a hired director and prestige, and that's it.
Yeah,
absolutely. From the outside world, as viewers of movies, we don't think about this very much. So for all of our benefit, what exactly is a director of photography responsible for?
Well, that's a big question with a lot of caveats. But according to the book, which I would say is the ASC manual, it's the director of photography is supposed to be responsible for everything visual imagery on the screen, including the lighting, the camera setups, the choice of coverage, the framing, camera movement, lens choice, positioning, and all of that. but it also depends definitely on who your collaborators are, you know, because we are there for the director in the end.
Sure.
And some directors are very, very specific and technical about what they want and what they don't want. And others just leave it up to you to do what you do best and, you know, and tell the story with the camera.
So you've got the director of photography title for a lot of your movies, but we also see the second unit director of photography. What does that split look like? And does that person actually kind of report to you, or do they report to their director, their own director, or do they report to, I don't understand the hierarchy there.
Okay, well, second unit director of photography works under the main unit.
Okay.
They're generally used when the main unit can't cover that much work, or stuff is done in disparate locations, or if it's specialized work like miniatures or action units. I mean, on all the films that I did up until I think the first time I even had any second unit director of photography work was on the Kite Runner.
Okay.
And that was because we needed somebody to stay behind and do some shots of traveling shots of cars driving and a few things like that we didn't have time to wait for because we were out in the wilds of Western China and we had to keep moving. But on all the other movies that I've done, I did all the, what would be called second unit work, all the action shots, all the car chasing and all that stuff. On a bigger movie like Quantum of Solace, where there's a lot of action, be it car or hand-to-hand or airplane or whatever. And I always feel it's best to get somebody who's a specialist, who knows what they're doing, that's what they do it best, and they can do it probably in half the time that I could do it, and probably better. So in pre-production or when they're hired, you have a meeting with them, and you go over the scenes that they're going to shoot and what they're going to shoot. They look at the stuff that you've shot, or that you talk about the stuff you're going to shoot that goes together with the scenes that are either intercut or cut after or before, or just to get the basic look. The idea, it's a challenge. Being a second unit DP, which I just did some this last year, it's a challenge because you want to, do what you can,
yes,
your best, but you also have to make it seamlessly match into the first unit photography, because sometimes it really is intercut shot for shot, and sometimes it's a scene that's stuck in, and sometimes it's a complete standalone. But you really, if it stands out separate, then it's kind of really a mistake. So yeah, like on Quantum of Solace, I had meetings with Sean O'Dell and Dan Bradley, who was hired as director, second unit director, because he specialized in car chases. I don't know if you've looked up his IMDb, but he's among the best. He did, big car chases like in all the Bourne movies, the Moscow subway thing and all that. But he's also done the very simple ones that really get you, like in Adaptation and Pulp Fiction. Those suddenly just, they hit you. So we had long discussions, and Dan and Mark and I sat down for a few days in my guest house before going to England and talked about that opening scene that Dan was going to do the directing on. And then when we got to England, we hired Sean O'Dell. We hired, interviewed a few people. We had to hire local. That was part of the Bond edict, is you have to hire British. Couldn't bring anybody with us, so they let us bring Dan.
Scene, so
it's an amazing scene. Did a great job.
Yes.
We did pre-visit a bit. We did, talk about how it should be done. I talked with Dan about some camera angles and some things to make the car look, for mysterious stuff at the very beginning of it. But in the end, you got to give in to let them do what they do best, and Dan knows what he's doing. And he was able to make it match well enough that all the interior shots of Daniel in the car driving, the close-ups, were all done back on Pinewood on green screen or blue screen. So it matched beautifully, done really well. They did all the plates they needed. So it's, and then other second unit stuff like on Quantum, the Panama or Haiti boat chase scene.
Okay.
Simon Crane was the director on that. And we brought in one of my friends who I think is one of the best second unit DPs in the world, Josh Bleibtreu. I brought him to shoot it, and we discussed, and we were there at the same time. So we were both in Panama, in Cologne, shooting. We were shooting dialogue scenes and other action scenes while they went off to shoot the boat. They'd come back, they'd show us some, footage that they shot. We'd say, well, can you do this? Can you do that? And they got some, great stuff using a rubber arm on a boat chasing and all that. So there was a very close contact there, but you don't always have that close. Since then, on other movies that I've had second unit, I had second unit on The Host, because it was all that helicopter chasing stuff. And we had two of the best helicopter people in the world, Fred North, the pilot, Dylan Goss, the aerial DP. So I mean, it's basically, my thing is, whenever you can get somebody to do better work than you can for action or anything like that, do it. I don't have an ego involved in that. And we ran into those problems on the Red Sea Diving Resort.
Right.
Where we had, I know the producer probably doesn't want to hear this, but I've said it out loud a couple of times already in the press, I think. The producers were trying to save money in prep, and we had already scheduled to have Vic Armstrong and his action unit do.
That's a good action unit.
He's a good action unit.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen the Red Sea Diving Resort.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, the big, the chase scene towards the end with the airplane that goes over and all that. Okay, all that stuff was supposed to be done by Vic Armstrong and some of the other action stuff. Well, they decided to save $225,000 by taking his unit out of the show.
Oh.
So they just cut that out of and now we had an extra $225,000. But they weren't changing the schedule.
Oh, man.
They weren't changing anything. So now it was up to us, first unit, to shoot all that in the same amount of time. And I kept saying to them, we're not a action unit. And I had some very challenging, I should say, to say the least, I will only say that, challenging camera crew, operators, that were not really action guys. And there's some real specialized stuff that you do when you're doing action, and a director who knows what they're doing. Well, Gideon, as wonderful a director as he is, and he knew shots that he wanted, he's still, thinking more. We're spending our time doing more about the drama and all of that, and trying to squeeze this into a schedule that was absurd. So the South African production company producer, who had been an AD in his past and always wanted to be a director, decided he was going to direct the second unit. And let me just tell you that the action in that scene and the action in the movie is kind of blah. It's not really exciting. It's not done as well as it should have been done. And they went out 3 or 4 times over and over again. Once or twice, because of fog, they couldn't shoot too much. But Gideon asked for specific shots, and they would come back, and he goes, well, where is that shot? And they go, oh, well, we didn't really think that, it was not a, so second unit to me is, you've got to have the best, and they've got to be on the same page as the first unit. And they can up the game, but, suggest, talk to them, let them know what you're doing, and do that. I mean, Igor Meglic is a great second unit DP. Simon Crane has been a great, second unit director, as has Dan Bradley. I mean, to me, the best is, and I'm spacing on his name now. We originally were going to use him on Quantum, but he was being offered a movie to direct first unit by Ridley Scott. He usually chooses all the second unit for Ridley. He's, God, and I have a picture of us together at one of the festivals. He's a director cameraman. So he's amazing with second unit. He's the best in the world as far as I'm concerned. But he was going to do the Ridley movie, and then that fell apart, so we never got to do it. But we lost him. I suggested getting him in for second unit for the Red Sea Diving Resort, and they were hemming and hawing, and they just didn't want to spend the money. And it was to me, it was a big mistake because they ended up cutting the movie as an action movie more than a human drama movie. Right. They cut so much of the human drama out because there was a long story, but the contract deal was that it had to deliver a 2-hour cut. Couldn't be over 2 hours, including titles. And the movie ran with all the proper scenes and the real human drama. It ran about 2 hours and 35 minutes, I think. Yeah. But they wouldn't accept it. So he had to cut 35 minutes out. Yeah. So they wanted to keep the action in.
Yeah, that's too bad because that really is the human side of that story is really quite amazing when you look
Yeah.
at all those refugees and what happened there.
Yeah, and what happened, and the internal thing between all the different members of the Mossad group, these agents who had their histories. So much of their histories were taken out. So much of the conflicts between them and all that, and it became I still like the movie. I think it's still a good movie, but it lost a lot of the spice and the tendons and all the stuff that really makes something that you really just want to keep watching and everything.
Okay, yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Now let me actually kind of shift back a little bit to Quantum here because we're
Sure.
talking about the different roles, and one role we really haven't talked much about is the camera operator. So
Yes.
in Quantum, I know in other movies you've done some operating. Did you do any operating in Quantum?
Yeah, on Quantum, I did basically C camera whenever there was a third camera needed because there was so much to deal with, and I had I was watching monitors for the first two cameras. I had two really good operators on that show who were exceptional, and I don't want to do so much of this fast running around handheld anymore. And George Richmond was great at that. We got him recommended by Chivo from after he had done Children of Men, and he came on. And then Mark Milsom, who had been a camera assistant for me on Finding Neverland, was operating, and he's a great operator. He passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, in a bad accident in Africa. But yeah, so I did C camera. We did a lot of third camera stuff, especially on all the action scenes that we were involved with, like the blowing up the hotel, the interior blowing up, that slow motion thing with the camera tracking across on a wire with all the glass breaking and all that. We had like 5 cameras on that.
Yeah. I always wonder how many cameras. Is 5 about the maximum you use, or is there?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. We carried, like 2 silent cameras, a 235 and a 435, and then we had probably 2 LTs and an ST at all times.
In Quantum, when you're prepping for the filming, is there such a thing as a typical day, or or is that a crazy idea?
No, there's nothing typical there's no typical days really on any movie, I'd say, because in prep, and we had a nice long prep on that. I think it was 4 months.
Okay.
12 or 16 weeks of prep, but there was a lot to include in that. It meant 2 trips through Europe and to South America to look for locations and to tech scout the locations, a pre-scout in Italy and Switzerland and Austria before we even did our real scout, and then all the time back at Pinewood in prep, going through the script. Mark and I, sit down every day as we did on every movie before that since Monsters Ball. We would go through the script and work out every shot, every scene, every camera position and layout and how to do it. So when we got on set, we had a book, a Bible with everything in it, of how we wanted to shoot. So the ADs also knew which direction to shoot first and, when we were going to turn around and all that. So we spent every day doing that for months. And we also had then, you get all these meetings in between. There's a meeting with the costume designer. There's a meeting with the VFX people. There's a meeting with the special effects people. There's a meeting with the props guy. There's a meeting with the set decorator. There's a meeting with, you name it.
Right.
That Mark had his meetings. I had my meetings, and we had our meetings together. And then you have to go out and suddenly, we just found another location in downtown London. Let's run out and take a look at this and see if this could work. And let's talk to this. And then, and he had casting in between too. And so there's a lot, every day is a new adventure.
Or like surviving on chaos.
Yeah, exactly. And then the crazy thing is, you feel like, there's all this, wasted time. Yeah, so during prep, during these times, you're going, like sometimes I'm sitting in my office going over things and going, I feel like I could probably be doing something else, but there's really nothing to do. I'm wasting a lot of time, and I've got all this extra time. Why are we spending so much time in prep? We should be shooting already, because everybody gets a little antsy too. You want to start shooting. And then as soon as the first time, a week before shoot, and then suddenly it's, oh my God, are we shooting already? And then you start shooting, and you can't slow down. There is a freight train on your back with 1,000 people moving fast, and you got to just keep up with it, and you can't slow down. and you
And doing all
can't
that good
hesitate.
prep work doing all that good prep
It's-
work makes it easier, I would assume.
Yes, it makes it doable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is that fairly common that there's that much prep done before shooting,
No.
or is that just the Bond way, if you will?
That is the Bond and the budget way.
Okay.
If you have a big budget, I think our budget was 225, then you have budgeted time to prep, and you know that you have like 12 locations around the world, and we were in 7 different countries and 2-3 different units, that you have a lot of stuff to deal with, and all the car people, the construction people, and all that stuff, all the special stuff that has to be built. So, but no, normal movies, again, it's totally dependent, I think, on budget. And I usually give extra days or weeks of free prep because they say, okay, we're going to bring you on 2 weeks before shoot. And I go, well, wait a second, that's not, I need more time than that to prep. I need to see locations before. You're going to choose everything, and then you're going to call me and say, okay, shoot this place. I'm going to say, well, this place doesn't work because the direction or this or that. Let's be real about it. If it's money is the reason, I will come in and do it on my own time, because I need to do the job I can. Yeah. So it's always, I'd say it's budget dependent. It goes anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks, I think, or 8 weeks. 5-6 weeks is kind of a normal these days. Although we'll see what happens with the new reel, the new reality.
Right.
Yeah, that's true with the whole pandemic stuff. It's going to be really interesting to see how things change.
Yeah, because I don't know if you've read any of the protocol propositions for how to shoot, but they're I think most of them are untenable to do anything bigger than like a $200,000 5-person movie. It's so much that has to be dealt with at this point until there's a vaccine.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a different world all of a sudden.
It is. Yeah. There's no time to die, as they say.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned all the prep work and how that helps when you get to the actual on-set filming and so on. And that you said it's more like a freight train or whatever. We're going to ask about that day, if that looks like what that kind of day looks like. But you're saying that's really full bore.
Yeah, it's and for me it's like it is on every movie. And I know I've talked to other DPs, and everybody says it's the same to them. The first day you get on set, you're like, do I really know what I'm doing? Am I capable of doing this? Have I ever done this before? It's like starting over again, all over again. And then you start going and you get the first half of the day going, you go, oh yeah, this is what it's all about. This is how it starts. Sometimes they throw you into the first day as like a really heavy, big scene, and you go like, first, hopefully your AD is smart enough to say, this isn't the best way to start off the movie. The first day with especially a new crew. These are people I'd never worked with before, except for Mark and the first AD and the visual effects person. And on most movies these days, because you go to different states or wherever, you can't bring your own crew. You're with new people. So it's starting off, that first day is always a lot of freak out, but you keep it to yourself. And then it starts to go and, you keep up with things. And fortunately, one thing I really liked on Quantum, and it happened also on Finding Neverland, but it was less enjoyable on that one, was that the British crews don't work more than a 10-hour working day, 10-hour shoot, 1 hour lunch. And it's not that they have a strong union. They just say, 5 o'clock, we're going to the pub. We tried that on Finding Neverland. We had to complete a scene. And the AD says, well, we're going to wrap now. And Mark and I were both looking at each other and says, we have 2 setups to do on this scene. We're already here. Everything's all set. Can't we just, no, the boys are ready to go. Couldn't fight with them. In the end, I really appreciate a short day. A 10-hour shoot day makes a lot of sense because you have a life. Even if you're on location, you can get back to the hotel. You can actually have a real dinner, and you can get sleep, and you're refreshed for the next day. When we do these 14, 16-hour days, it's relentless, and especially when you get into 6-day weeks, which we ended up doing on Quantum, almost all 6-day weeks, because we had a squeezed schedule because of the proposed actors' strike that was supposed to happen June 1st, even though we were already in the Writers Guild strike. And then the actors' strike was supposed to happen.
It's a crazy industry.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So now we've talked about some of this your other stuff that you've worked on, the other parts of your body of work that you've done. We've mentioned a few of these movies. We mentioned Monsters Ball, Finding Neverland, Kite Runner, Rattlesnake, Host. There are a bunch of them in here.
Yeah.
And then you've got Stay, which is a totally different movie, which I would imagine was pretty fun for you as a cinematographer to work on. So is there anything in your background that we haven't kind of mentioned that you want to highlight before we dive further into Quantum?
Well, background, I mean, I started off doing news, world news, European feature news, and documentaries.
Right.
Okay.
Back in, after I got out of art school and decided that I couldn't make a living making art films, I gave up on it. So I decided to, hit the commercial world, and I got into doing documentaries and then music videos and commercials.
You were in Italy doing some of that
And
too.
then I moved to Italy and started doing my first feature. My first 3 features were in Italy. Then I came back to the US after 10 years, met Christopher Guest after a run of music videos and some commercials. And so I did 3 movies with Christopher between 95 and 2005.
Well, those are great. Those are fun movies.
And they're, part of the highlight of my career. It's like couldn't have more fun and work with better and more appreciative and a wonderful group of people. And from Waiting for Guffman up through For Your Consideration, with all the actors, that whole group, we became really good friends and the respect. And in fact, I was in London prepping Bond, and I went to a nightclub with Harry Shearer and Michael McKean, because Harry's wife Judith was doing a performance there. She's a singer, an amazing jazz singer and comedian. So she was doing a performance, and Harry was going to stand in and play some bass with her for that performance. So we're there, and I remember sitting at the table with Michael and Harry, and Michael just looked at me and he says, "So, now that you're Mr. 007 doing this Bond movie, does that mean we're never going to get to work? You're too big to work with us again?" And I said, "Absolutely not. No way. I would, I'd love to do another movie with Chris." And of course, after that, we didn't do another one, but I might be doing something with Harry coming up.
Okay.
But yeah, it was, some of those were some of the most fun times of my life. And in fact, during this lockdown at home, we've been watching movies at night and doing some double features. And the other night we watched Best in Show, which I hadn't seen in quite a while. And that was a great experience.
We just lost Fred Willard just recently.
Yes, I know. It was terrible.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. I was talking to Harry and to Jennifer Coolidge about that. It's a real shame.
So when you were working on Quantum, how were the in production folks, the crew and everything to work for? Obviously it's tense and intense, and the budgets are probably the biggest you've had in any of the previous films you've done. How was that dynamic?
They were among the most supportive producers I've ever worked with.
Wow.
Barbara and Michael they're totally about making it the best it can be in the Bond world.
Yeah, like Cubby.
They don't want it,
put it on the screen.
Yes, put it on the screen and make it in our mold. Things change. The times have changed. It's now 2007 at that point. So there's things that have changed. It's not as misogynistic as it had been.
Right.
But they were all about giving us what we needed to do the right thing, to put on the screen what we had said we wanted to do. They were always supportive behind us. The only thing that I ever got a pushback on was in prep at the very beginning. I suggested that we shoot the whole movie in 65 millimeter, 70 millimeter. And they said, "Well, show us what would it be like, prove it." So, and I didn't have the time or the wherewithal to shoot something original. So I leaned on a friend of mine who was, in retrospect, was a big mistake. He had a film that had been put together called As Good as It Gets.
Okay.
And it was basically a comparison between 65 millimeter and 35 millimeter. And so we went over to Sony and we got the print. We projected it on the screen there, and it was a real disappointment. And as I'm watching, I'm going, "No, this is really not convincing anybody of anything." And we got out of there, and they said, "Well, we're going to talk about it, but honestly, we don't think that there's really that much of a difference what we saw on the screen to make it worth spending the extra $2.5 million." And I said, I can't argue with it. It's like I couldn't. But they were extremely supportive, and it's as so much as that they let me do some testing with, at the time, the Red 1 camera. I contacted Jim Gennard, and he flew over to London in his private jet with his guy Jared, and they brought over a couple of Red 1 cameras, which were brand new at the time, before the Mysterium X sensor. And we spent 3-4 days at Pinewood and in London shooting scenes on 35 and on the Red 1, shooting some tests and some rigs and car stuff. And I thought of using it for some special shots, not for the whole movie by any means. Mm-hmm. And we did the testing, and they let us do it all. They let us, present it. And some of the stuff I said, I would really like to use this camera for a few things because of some of the effects that I got out of it, the possibilities. They were fine with it, but Sony said no.
Yeah.
It was at a point where Sony said, absolutely not, no red cameras on our movie. Oh. Then finally they said, yes, you can use it, but they can't have any images of it, no talk in the press, and no screen credits for red. And Jim said to me, at that point, he says, well, what good is it for us then to, to do it? So, but no, they were totally, the whole production crew, the PAs, the office, well, everybody in the back room and behind it were all completely wonderful and supportive.
That's great. So was it digital or was it film?
It was film. It was all 35.
No blend, nothing. It was all 35.
Nothing digital. No, well, yes. The only digital was we had to do plates for the paleo sequence.
Okay.
Because we went to the paleo. They had been to the paleo. Barbara and Michael had gone to the paleo the year before and saw it and decided this had to be part of the next movie.
It is fabulous.
It is. So that was a no-brainer. That had to be in the movie. So in June, we went on a 14-day bus and plane tour around Italy looking for locations because the script was unfinished. Yeah. So we drove around. This is my favorite story of the whole movie. Actually, the best time of the whole movie was this 14-day trip. It was a luxury vacation in a luxury bus and luxury hotels with amazing meals. The production location manager was a guy that I'd worked with in Venice as a company there doing location. Guido Cerasuolo has a company called Mestre Cinema. And we drove we flew to Bari and looked around there and then drove over to Naples and then drove all the way up through to Rome, up Cinque Terre, over to Florence, from there up to the Alps, at the Austrian border.
Yeah, Bolzano and all those.
Through Bolzano and Merano. We stopped at the most amazing spa hotel in Bolzano. It's incredible.
I spent the night in Bolzano. It's a beautiful little town.
It's beautiful.
Where the frozen is. Yeah.
Yeah. I have family from relatives from that part. But Guido guided this whole tour of ours by hotels and restaurants. So he always knew we were going to stop for lunch at the best amazing restaurant in Parma. Or the best, it was phenomenal. And incredible hotels, spectacular hotels. And then we got up to Stelvio Pass, and we found the Stelvio Pass, which we scouted it. We said, this is great. We can do a car chase here. It'd be amazing. And then we found out at the end that it's only open for 2 weeks in June. And the rest of the time, basically, there's snow there. So we couldn't use it, couldn't plan on it. And then we went from there into Austria. We went to Switzerland, and we looked at an underground cave with a lake. As we knew it was going to be too small to actually use in the movie, but we did it to see what it was really like and to take pictures and to get production designer to get ideas of what he could recreate. And then from there, we went to Austria to see the Tosca performance because they were going to keep it, it runs for 2 years, and they decided that would be a good thing to put into the script. So we watched the performance before we got there to prep it with the director and the lighting designer and all.
That was a great scene in that.
That was a great scene. And they copied it. Boy, did they copy it. And what movie did I just see? There's a recent espionage spy chase thing where they did a scene in an outdoor opera. Very much like it. I can't remember what it was. Maybe that bad Michael Bay movie, Six Underground. Something I saw in the last 6 months. I go, this reminds me too much of the Tosca scene. Too much.
Well, this is one of the things Dan and I actually do in our podcast. Is we try to find where are these scenes that influenced other scenes. So like that vault scene in Mission Impossible, coming almost almost exactly, I mean, modernized, but
Yeah.
right out of Top Copy. Right? And it's
Yeah.
like, wow.
Right. So
Well, you know, they say borrow from the best,
Exactly.
you know?
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
That's fabulous. That sounds like a great trip. Obviously,
Oh, it was spectacular.
Italy is beautiful, and how could you go wrong eating and drinking in Italy? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm jealous. I want that now.
Yeah. No, I do too. I want to go back to that same trip. It was originally, I wasn't supposed to go on it. I was prepping another movie called, I forget, it was a small movie written by the guy who wrote Adaptation, the book. It was, I forget what it's called now. It was about a guy who was a sex addict who works.
The one with Fassbinder?
No,
Shame?
no, not Shame. No, that's
Okay.
a Brazilian. That's a brilliant movie.
Yeah.
Amazing movie. No, this was a much smaller movie. It was with Clark Gregg starred in it and directed it, and it was supposed. He's like a sex addict who's in a works at a 1700s restoration village kind of thing, like Smithy Town. And I was prepping with him, and I remember he was here. We had some pre-pro meetings at my house and talking about it. And then I got this call from Mark about this trip to go to do this scout throughout Italy. It was going to be in the middle of June or leave in June. And I go, God, I can't do it because I'm working on this movie with Clark. He said, well, okay, we'll send McConkey, who is our operator, Steadicam operator, who'd been done like the last 5-6 movies with us. And I said, okay, yeah, he's you know, he can check out everything and all that. And then one day I said, wait a second. I can't let McConkey have this vacation. This is too good to be true. I really need to do this, and I don't want to miss out on. Well, also, I don't want to miss out on choices that are being made for locations
right.
way beforehand. It's just not right. And this movie with Clark, I was like, I said, you know what? I'm really sorry, but it's early enough. I'm going to back out. And we still had, you know, I'd only prepped with him, talked with him for 2 or 3 days. So I backed out of it. I don't think he was thrilled, but I backed out. Got on a plane and went to Italy. And in the end, McConkey couldn't have done the movie anyhow because they refused to have any American crew.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
They could only have 2 Americans in the IA. It was all because of Hollywood post-60s. And they refused to shoot on American soil because they wouldn't have any IA operators. We did have IA crew in Panama, but once they're off the soil and it was a separate section or something, it didn't trigger the Hollywood post-60s because they don't want to pay the residuals.
Right.
Yeah.
So McConkey going on that wonderful trip would have been a real nice vacation for him, but then he couldn't have done the movie anyhow.
Right.
Yeah.
I tried to bring him in, actually. At one point, I did try to have my operator fired because of it. He was not paying attention to what I was asking him to do. He was trying to do his own thing, and he was very rude about it. And I went to the producers, and I asked to have him fired in exchange. And they said, well, let's see, let's talk about it, see what we can do. And I said, and I want to bring in McConkey. And he said, no, you can't bring in an American. Sorry, no Americans. So, and then in the end, it all worked out, and George and I become friends again. And he's become a pretty big DP in his own right. He's done quite a few well-known movies, including that Elton John biopic.
Right. So
And the Kingsman movies. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we're talking about how one movie influences another and so on, and where these ideas all come from. In Finding Neverland, there's that brilliant ending of the film.
Yeah.
And there's several other monumental scenes in that film that are just spectacular. Roberto, when you came upon that idea for the ending, where James and Peter are sitting on the bench, and then they become transparent and disappear, leaving James' hat and cane. I mean, how did you come up with that?
Yes, I did. That movie, actually, I had there's a lot of scenes in there that I came up with that Mark embraced, as he generally tends to. You know, I don't get too many things rejected and things that fit. Sometimes I say a crazy idea that doesn't fit, but there were 3 or 4 things in there that really fit. So we were shooting that scene on the bench, and Mark and I were talking. And as the thing, when the dialogue ends and all, I said, hey, Mark, why don't we just lock off the camera, take them out, keep the camera rolling then, and then you can have them dissolve just to the bench and then have the credits roll. He says, oh my God, you found the ending to my movie, to our movie, to the movie. This is amazing. Oh, it's great. Love it, love it, love it. But I don't want the camera just to be locked off. I want it to be more dynamic than that. So I want it to be, we do the dolly back, and we don't stop, but in the dolly, they disappear in the move. And I said, okay. And the VFX guy was there with us. Well, it's going to have to be a motion control shot, because otherwise, even if you do a perfect timing and everything, 24 frames a second, you're going to be slightly off. You can be a half a frame off or something like that,
Right.
no matter how good your dolly grip is and all that. So we had a company there, and they brought out a sled, very simple motion control thing. All it really was a sled and a tilt, camera tilt and pan. And it jammed. It malfunctioned. So we said, I guess let's just do the, and Mark said, no, we got to do it the right way. And they said, okay, we can come back, I think tomorrow. We'll come back tomorrow and shoot it. So we came back the next day and reshot with the move and the disappearing and the whole thing. And it was worth it.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It is. It works really, really well.
Yeah.
So that wasn't going to be the end. You found the end for him.
Well, that was the last thing that was written there on the bench, and console himself. He consoles the kid, and, and it could have just been that and a fade out. It could have been, a Truffaut in iris into black, into that. But I said, wouldn't it be cool, because it's the spirit of what the story is. It's Neverland. It's like they've always been there and they're never there. It's like they die, she dies, but she's not. So who knows where they go? But leaving the hat and the cane is just a nice little.
It's a great touch.
Emblem.
Yeah. So it has that concept, as you always are saying, you learn from things you're doing, obviously, into where you go next. Has that concept reappeared in one form or another in any of your other films? The concept of
offhand, I can't think of anything. But in Finding Neverland, things like, and I know you had written to me and asked about, where Barry and his wife go up the stairs and they go into separate bedrooms, and she goes into her room and he opens his, and it's the lawn with the trees, and he goes out to fly the kites. That was my idea. I said, because they were going to two separate bedrooms, and his bedroom was a closet, the way that house was built. It was a short closet, not a big one. So I said, they're both going to go in and we'll cut. And I go, well, wouldn't it be nice? Because I was looking for transitions always.
Right. That's the next thing I want to ask you about.
And it was the next scene was he's out with Kate and the kids flying kites. And I said, well, because so much of this is in his mind, he's coming up with these ideas, and it's to write a book and to play and whatever. Why don't we have him just walk straight into the yard? So, well, how do we do that? He goes, well, we'll put a green screen in that room, which was very tough because the room is only about 3 feet deep. And we did a fabric green screen that, came out and hit a wall and went around and all, but it was enough to pull a good mat.
Yeah. And you could get the lighting in it, enough lighting in there? Yeah.
Just, I put probably a Kino tube over the doorway or something, or a couple of tubes on the side. Yeah. And VFX did, they probably had to do a rotoscope, but. Okay.
That was a gorgeous scene.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to talk about next, because transitions in movies is one of the keys. That's one of the things we always look for, Tom and I, when we're watching movies, to see how one scene shifts into the next scene. And you really appreciate when that happens seamlessly and effectively. And we've looked at some of your other work besides Quantum and so on, like in Monsters Ball. The transition seems to be more direct, like boom, cut to another scene. For instance, like when Hank is talking to the black man when he's standing on the side of the road with his two sons. It wasn't a pleasant conversation, but the scene switches, bam, right to the guards at the state penitentiary testing out the electric chair. And there's many other transitions like that, and camera angles and different things. Letitia sleeping nude, shot from above, the shot of the guard on horseback. I love that. Guarding the
that was actually a second unit shot. I forgot. We did have.
That's a great shot.
I had a really good cameraman down in New Orleans. I needed like 3 or 4 shots at the plantation because we didn't have time at Angola. We had 5 days there to shoot everything. Wow. And so I hired this guy, Francis, to shoot a few shots. And we told him what we needed. Yeah. And he got some atmospherics.
Yeah, that was
beautiful. It was great, yeah.
It was shot just almost ground level, just above the foliage and so on. Just perfect. And then Finding Neverland, we talked about a couple of the scenes already, about the going into the room and transitioning to the park. One of the ones we love, though, the transitions is when James is dancing with the dog in the park.
Yeah.
And he tells
Yeah.
it it's a bear, and it
Right.
transitions back and forth to the circus setting with him dancing with a bear. I mean, that's just great stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's another one of the transitions we love. That
And that was always written into the script.
Yeah.
That he's talking about it, and then in the imagination,
Yes,
you see the circus and the bear.
beautifully done. And then I think Tom had some comment about Stay.
So I wanted to go back to Stay again, because
that
that
was a-
movie.
Stay is all
guess-
transitions.
Yeah,
Stay is all transitions.
Yeah, and I would imagine as a cinematographer, that was fun to figure out all the different camera angles and stuff you were going to use. Anything
that
you wanna
was-
talk about that with that.
Stay like in Monsters Ball, which was all predetermined, all our shots and all our cuts from scene to scene,
Okay.
because that's one of the things that helps me with transitions is going through the script with Mark or any director and talking about it and knowing how we're going to shoot a scene and knowing what the next scene that we're cutting to is. And it doesn't always end up that way in the edit. Sometimes things get shifted around, but generally I've got to go with that as the blueprint for
Okay.
what the movie's going to be. So I try to plan shots that will transition into something, and especially it helps if you already know your new locations or the rooms or whatever you're going to be in, so you know something to transition to. I'm a little tired of the classic transition of, okay, you go to the drink on the tray, close up, being carried around a room and then being brought into something, which is a very typical transition or close up of an ashtray and the cigarette comes up and then you're in the next scene. I try to find things that are a little more dynamic or more interesting than just that, or even if it's just a visual frame that matches.
yes,
That's not necessarily so transitional, but it's a visual match. Stay, we plotted out the whole movie, of course.
Mhm.
That had to be, it was so visual effects heavy.
Yeah.
Always planned to be. And so we knew where we had to do green screens and transitional things. And we knew that we wanted to have all these really cool transitions because that's the story.
Right.
It's the fact of Ewan and Naomi they're all Ryan's character.
yeah.
It's just their faces that he sees when he's dying, and he builds this in his last moments. He builds this narrative. So we wanted to make this switch between them, like where you see the bus in the rain at night. He gets off before he goes to the dance studio. You see in the bus, and then the door opens the reflection, and now it's Ryan coming out.
Right.
Or you.
Terrific.
The only time we did a physical thing was on the staircase, coming down the stairs
Mhm.
when he goes to collect him, where they have this dialogue fight and they're like switching sides and they're going back and forth and they're repeating each other's dialogue.
Right.
One thing we did and we shot it specifically in the beginning in Ewan's psychiatrist's office at school, shot them both from both sides, facing both directions. So you could intercut so they're looking at each other or both the exact same frame looking the same direction, as just a lead into what's throwing the viewer out,
Right.
throwing them off, because you're going, that's an unusual cut. You're looking
How
at the
did you
person
do that? Why would you?
and
do
he's
that?
looking
Yeah.
the same way and he's got the same background, but it's a different person, and you're just changing the face in there, which normally you don't want to do. But
Mhm.
here I wanted to reinforce this whole thing of who is this character really, and where's and playing with time, like where Ewan gets out of the car at Ryan's mother's house,
Yes.
and the car door opens, he gets out, the camera booms up, and he's already up on the thing,
Right.
and the porch is empty except for him, and then you cut to over his shoulder and she's sitting there. It's a horror film trick, but
Right.
still using the time warp and all those things to reinforce.
It's an intriguing film.
It really is.
I love it,
By the way, go see Stay.
and very underrated. It didn't do very well at all.
Really.
Yeah, which I didn't understand
movie.
because that was
Well,
such
they
a cool
didn't-
movie.
New Regency didn't push it. They were all loving it when they were seeing dailies and going, this is fabulous, this is amazing. And then when it got cut and it got done and it got finished, they goes, ooh, we don't know what to do with this. And they didn't advertise it. They didn't push it at all. It almost went straight to, it was in the theater contractually for I think a week. And then it got booted out. It did well in Germany and Brazil and Mexico.
Yeah. It's an intriguing film. Everyone
Yeah.
should see it. So obviously, as a cinematographer, you're thinking about transitions all the time. And for Quantum of Solace, how difficult a task would that have been? Because if you look at the the pre-title chase sequence, the first 5 seconds, there must be a dozen or more transitions just in that. How difficult in Quantum of Solace was it to do this, to take this, what you've learned about transitions in all these other movies to Quantum and do what?
I don't think it was terribly difficult for me in the body of the scenes that we did ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always know what's going to happen when action unit takes over, and how it's going to cut from a shot you did to their first shot.
Right.
You hope that the editor is, on board with making a good transition, which generally they were. There was a second editor on that movie who was doing most of the action stuff, so I can't speak for his mindset. But I think because, again, Mark and I had planned out the whole movie shot by shot, scene by scene, we knew where we were going from one to the other.
Yeah.
And I was able to try as best as possible, because that's also a very architecturally designed film, very graphic,
Right.
Yeah.
which we worked with Dennis Gassner, who's a brilliant production designer, on making these spaces, locations, sets, and everything work for the camera to get great angles and shots and be very graphic, that we could use those graphic images to advance the story and to cut from one scene to the next.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like a lot of the movies you do have that type of a feel where you're really taking in where you are and opening it up wide to be able to see what you're looking at.
Yeah, I try to do that, and I had some issues on Kite Runner because I think there were some scenes where we did some shots that were really amazingly big landscape beauty to show you, because you really need to feel this location. And I think that a couple of them were cut too short. They were like kind of a blip, and you didn't really get to breathe. Because I don't believe a movie should always just be like that, especially that kind of movie.
Well, yeah, exactly.
You need time. Sometimes you need time just to breathe and get inspired and think about what just happened, and then dive back into it.
Well, yeah, like in that movie, there's a scene where there's the boys are outside the main part of the village, and you can see the pomegranate tree.
Yeah.
And it took a while for me to kind of get absorbed into that red pomegranate on that tree, and if you cut that out too quickly, I would have missed that.
Yeah.
And then you come back around talking about the pomegranate, and I'm like, oh, okay, that made sense there.
Yeah. I mean, the material was there. Believe me, we shot enough and kept the camera rolling long enough on some of these things that it could have been used to give you time and place.
Yep.
And in general, there's the couple that I really remember the most were the shot where the two guys are driving in the Jeep around the lake heading out, and we had the camera mounted on the car with the lake in the background for the entire dialogue and have them inside talking. And it's a beautiful shot because that lake was incredible, and the whole mountains and everything. And I think Matt ended up using like a 2-second cut of the outside, and everything else was inside, and you lost the whole outside.
Wow.
And I was like, why just play? It plays so beautifully like that. There's nothing happening inside that's any different than seeing them through the windshields and feeling this whole environment that they're in.
Right.
That disappointed me. And then when they're crossing the border back with the kid, we had at the fight, he's all beaten up in the back of the seat, and they go through the border that basically doesn't exist. I mean, it's an open land with a fence,
right.
A gate that goes up with the mountains in the background. They're heading back there. That he left that running for about 3 seconds instead of just letting the car drive off in the distance for a bit, just to feel that magnificence of the Hindu Kush and the where that world was. But
so when you say that, then let's go back into Quantum and talk about the paleo scene for a minute, because in that one, you're cutting between that action of what's going on outside with this interrogation, and it kind of cuts back and forth a little bit. Is that something that's done in terms of the pre-production stuff and the prep work, or is that, okay, here's what we've got, let's figure out how we're going to then edit it together?
I think that was an editorial choice later on. I think we were always aware that you wanted to know something about what's going on, where this location is, what's going on outside this room,
right,
before you're thrust into it. So you have there's some anxiety in that this guy's escaping down through here, and you go, oh shit, there's that thing going on out there. Is he going to like end up right in the middle of it or outside or whatever? So yeah, that was probably enhanced in the edit. But I was starting to say earlier about digital. I'll go back to that on the film. When we went to the Palio in June, saw what we needed to do, chose camera positions. They had already reserved a few box seats so we could put cameras in seats. The year before, they reserved them already. But we went and looked, and I found places where we could shoot. We got permissions, and we went back in July and shot the second Palio, which was in July. And I think I had 6 operators on that. But we also knew that all that action stuff, the chase in the middle of the square, or the, it's not really a square, but where he comes up and out and is going to chase the guy across, could not be done during the real Palio.
Right.
There was no way. Right. So at the time, we got state-of-the-art Harry D21 digital cameras. We got 4 of those. With the visual effects guy, we chose 4 positions in the outskirts around the buildings of the whole Palio and shot overlapping plates of all of the stands and the action, the people in the background. He then, when we got to shoot at the Palio, we shot on location again, the final, the action scene, but with just about 150 extras in the square with us and nobody in the stands, that we then used those plates to put into the stands, so it felt like it was actually happening there. And they did a great job.
Yeah.
They really did an amazing job. So that was digital background. Yeah. And then the other digital thing we did was the skydiving, where they're holding each other. They got the one parachute and they're coming down. Mark said specifically, I remember in telling the VFX guy, I don't want this to look like The Bucket List, where Robin Williams or whoever it is, or Jack Nicholson, they're coming down in this skydiving, but it looks so fake. Right. It looks just like they shot them standing in place. And just, I want this to feel real. It's got to feel real. So we found a skydiving rehearsal practice tube outside of London that was big. It was probably almost a 20-foot circumference, 20-foot diameter, with viewing panels. And so they got Daniel and Olga in there, floating up this 140-mile-an-hour fan, blowing up at them. We put 4 Dalsa digital 4K cameras with these enormous refrigerator-sized recorders in a separate room. Built 4 of those, and I think we also had 6 Sony F900s shooting also for Elements. Shot the whole thing of them also with stunt doubles floating around. And then for one pass, George, with the ARRI 235, actually floated in there with them and got in close-ups of Olga and Daniel doing this flying, which was pretty incredible.
Yeah, it looks fast.
And then that was put into a sky background, exterior sky background, and falling into the cave. So those were the 2 elements of digital that were in Quantum of Solace. Everything else was 35 millimeter.
Yeah. Okay. And it looks perfect, though. It's not like CGI stuff that you see in some other films. Where that looks like. Yeah. This looks beautiful. It worked out. Okay, this seems to be a good spot to take a break, Roberto.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up here with part 1. Be sure to subscribe to our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Or you can listen on our website, spymovienavigator.com, and give us a 5-star rating when you review us. Send us a voice message and let us know what you think and what you would like us to talk about next.
This has been Tom Pizzato
and Silvestri
of SpyMovieNavigator.com. Join us for part 2 of our talk with Roberto Schaefer, the Director of Photography for Quantum of Solace, in our next episode of Cracking the Code of Spy Movies.